And we are live. Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock, Wednesday, October 7th. We've got a 4-game playoff slate to break down, and we have 7 of the 8 starting pitchers, so that's a good sign for 1 p.m. Eastern. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We believe this is the first time that we've done a baseball show together, so that should be fun. Greg, how are you?
Doing okay. I've got, like I said before, I've got a Tennessee Titans shirt on for good luck. So what could go wrong today?
Nothing has gone wrong for the Titans at all in the past 10 days, so you should be fine.
I think that's probably not true, but we'll see what happens. I don't even know if we might be doing more baseball shows together anyway, because there might not be football shows to do soon.
Also true. Are you a Titans fan?
No, not at all. I just thought it was funny to wear the shirt today.
Yeah, I hear you. I have a closet full of shirts of random teams, all of them based on me having fun. So I'm right there with you. Why is that showing up as a 0? That's a really weird sell. It's not important. Nobody needs to know. We're going to break down 4 games. One of those games and one of those teams does not have an official starting pitcher yet, but I think we can pretty much guess what's going to be going on there. I don't think it's going to have too big of an impact on the analysis of the game, so I think that we can move forward there. We have had an MLB strategy show a little bit earlier, so if you haven't checked that out, well, you're probably not going to, because this show is going to go all the way up until lock. We're going to go through all 4 games. We'll take some questions, so you guys know the drill. As you get in the door, please hit the thumbs up. Helps us out a ton. You know how I am about my likes. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Check out all of the other content we have. I'll let you guys know about some of the free content that we have on the site a little bit later. But first and foremost, I think we need to dive into Braves and Marlins. You ready?
Let's do it. Oh, the other thing too, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them. We've got time to kill on this show. If you answer questions, there's a very high likelihood that we will be answering them.
Yes, or that I'll point them out and ignore them. But one way or the other, questions are something that we're looking for today because we have plenty of time to go through it. Why is this cell showing up as a 0?
For which player or which?
No,
which stat?
So I have an aggregate of weighted runs created for each team, crossed with plate appearances, so I can get sort of like a team hitting rating. But it's showing up as 0, even though I have numbers in all of these cells. So one of them must be showing up as text. I'll figure it out as we go because I'm not sharing my screen. Let's start it off now. Atlanta Braves, Miami Marlins, which is still incredibly difficult for me to say. They are the Florida Marlins now and forever in my brain. 4.9 run implied total for the Braves, 3.5 for the Marlins. That's a 64% chance to win for Atlanta. Ian Anderson going for the Braves, Pablo Lopez for the Marlins. The place where we need to start is probably with Anderson. 9,500 on FanDuel, 8,200 on DraftKings. He's picking up 36% of the ownership on FanDuel, remember, single pitcher site, and 56% of the ownership on DraftKings. Let's just start there. How do you feel about Anderson as a clear chalk play for the day?
Yeah, well, I think he's definitely more favorable on DraftKings than FanDuel just because we need to roster 2 pitchers. It's really weird that he's almost the same ownership on DraftKings that he has on FanDuel. Because, we look at FanDuel, I think if we just compare the ownerships, and we'll talk about him later, but I think that at the high end, Clayton Kershaw for only $800 more, to me, is a much better option than Ian Anderson when considering the ownership difference. And I know that people will be outraged about Clayton Kershaw's postseason stats. We could talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But still, Ian Anderson, he's pitched really well so far this year. He came into the year as one of the higher regarded prospects in baseball. Fangraphs had him as a top 25 prospect in the league. He has a 2.54 FIP, a 3.45 xFIP, a really favorable fantasy numbers because he's striking out 11.5 hitters per 9 innings. So that all looks good. To the point about his ownership, though, it's a little bit too high. It doesn't mean that he's unplayable on a 4-game slate. It's just if I'm playing a lot of lineups, I'm probably going to have less ownership than the field does on Anderson.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I would much rather just pay another $1,400 on DraftKings for Kershaw. And I think that there's enough talent at the bottom that it doesn't really matter. I'm surprised to see the amount of ownership he's getting. Although he very clearly has a fantastic matchup. Marlins have the lowest implied total. And the Marlins lineup, I don't care that they're in the playoffs this deep. It's a below average lineup. So I understand why some of it's happening. I'm not entirely sure it should be as large as it is. On the other side,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
uh, going to the Marlins really quick about the lineup. They've hit lefties pretty well, except obviously doesn't matter against Ian Anderson. 89 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. When you consider all of the good offenses that are on the slate, they're pretty clearly the weakest offense. I think this is the only team with the WRC plus under 100 versus the handiness of the pitcher they're facing.
Yeah, it would be hard to take a stance in a different direction, just given everything we know. I mean, there's just the bottom of the like Sierra and Wallach, like not good. They're bad hitters. That's 2 of your 9 hitters in a playoff game are replacement level with the bat. That's a tricky spot to be in.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, what do we have as the? I was thinking maybe there'd be some leverage on them as a stack, but the ownership's pretty flat today. It's not like we're getting them at no ownership. We have them at 7.5% on DraftKings and
Same on FanDuel, basically.
same on FanDuel. So it's not even if Anderson was going to be 45% owned, the Marlins were going to be 2% owned as a stack, and be like, oh, that's good leverage there. But with them being around the same ownership as every other team, we can't really take that stance as some massive leverage play.
Right. We did get a question. You were asking for questions before. CP says, "Why is Ehrenberg plugged into the wall?" So wherever you have that charging cable above you, looks like it's plugged into the middle of your back.
Yeah, I'm a robot. You know what? That's the reason why FanDuel set up those no rules about how are you a robot? They're just trying to catch me. That's exactly what it is. As to why I have it there, it's just kind of convenient. It's where I plug in my secondary chargers, and then I'll plug my iPad into there sometimes during the show when if I'm running out of juice. So it's just kind of convenient. But yeah, we could say I'm plugged in also. I run on electricity.
It does look pretty funny. And salty old man, that because you cursed, it didn't get through. I will unban that comment because it's not bad. Did Josh cut his hair? Josh got a haircut. The length is still there, but I don't look like a scraggly, mulleted man any longer.
Boo.
Yeah, I agree. But I did get a haircut earlier today. Any interest in Pablo Lopez? 8,400 on FanDuel, 6,900 on DraftKings. Minimal ownership, 5% on FanDuel, 15% on DK. I mean, in a way, like the matchup is obviously way worse for Lopez. I don't think he's all that different relative to salary than Ian Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, relative to salary for sure. One thing about Pablo Lopez is, I mean, he had pretty decent peripheral stats this year. His ERA also wasn't bad at 3.61, but I mean, struck out over a hitter per inning this year. The walks were in check. He's a well above average starting pitcher. To your point, the real concern here is the matchup. The Braves have a really talented lineup. The other thing I'm a little concerned about too is the Marlins left Sandy Alcantara in the game yesterday for forever. He was way done, and they brought him out for the 7th inning anyway, and he let the first 2 runners get on, and then they took him out after that. So that's a concern for a couple of reasons. Number one, are they just going to leave Pablo Lopez in the game for forever, like they did with Alcantara yesterday, where he's having a good outing, and then they leave him in for a 7th inning when he's already about an inning and a half done, and then he ends up giving up a bunch of runs that kind of kills his fantasy score? Or are they going to go the other way, where because of what happened yesterday, they're going to give Lopez a really quick hook because they're down 1-0 in the series, leaving a starting pitcher in for too long, ended up coming to bite them. So there's definitely risk with Pablo Lopez, but I mean, to your point also is that for the price and for almost no ownership on DraftKings relative to the other options we have, I think he's viable. I wouldn't play him on FanDuel at 8,400 though.
No, I'm with you on that one. On DraftKings, in Alex's top pitchers tool, Pablo Lopez, 23% chance of being a top 2 starting pitcher. That is a bit ahead of his current ownership. So there is some value to be found. And clearly you'd be getting on the other side of some pretty heavy ownership on the first 4 bats for Atlanta, which I think we're going to transition into now. Atlanta Braves offense. They are 3rd in the top stack odds. Everybody's soared a bunch together. Oakland, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, the Yankees, and the Rays, all pretty similar. They're all pretty similar in ownership as well. Atlanta projecting out pretty neutrally from that regard. How do you feel about the Atlanta stack against the Marlins and Lopez?
Yeah, they have the highest implied team total on the slate. I assume that's going to be the highest. Maybe the Dodgers end up being higher because we don't have a betting line for them.
I have the Dodgers a 10th of a run ahead of them. There is a line on some books. So right now I have the Dodgers at 5 and the Braves at 4.9.
Yeah, and then obviously that's subject to change whenever the Padres decide to announce who's going to start for them tonight.
Right.
But with that said, I mean, we look at some of the Braves hitters here, particularly on DraftKings. Travis Darneau scored over 30 fantasy points yesterday, broke the slate, and DraftKings prices him down by $400 in a slightly easier matchup. So that makes no sense. So Darneau is it's hard to say anybody's a lock play or anything like that for baseball because there's so much variance, but he's going to be chalky and for good reason. Just the pricing's wrong there, and catcher's such a difficult position to get production out of. And Darneau is really one of the only reliable players at catcher on DraftKings I think we are likely to get fantasy points out of. The top hitters, I don't really have anything all that interesting to say about Acuna, Freeman, Ozuna. These are all great pay-up options, but it's also kind of obvious. If you're stacking the Braves where I think you could get some good ways to differentiate yourself, some of the hitters at the bottom of the lineup are not bad hitters and are not going to be nearly as popular as the guys at the top of the order. So Austin Riley's a guy with home run upside. Adam Duvall had like 3 games in the regular season where he hit multiple home runs. He kind of sucked for the rest of the season, but he had individual spurts where he played really well. But that kind of power upside is what you look for in GPP. And considering that he's not going to have nearly as much upside ownership as the bats higher up in the order, that's a good way you can make a Brave stack and actually differentiate yourself a little bit from the field.
We have Acuna and Ozuna and Darneau 18% or higher, with Darneau all. The rest of the team is 7. Adding in a couple of these bottom of the order guys, just Ozzy Albies at 7%, or going all the way down to the 9 hole, grabbing Austin Riley, hoping to buy a home run. He's 2% owned. You're going to get a unique Brave stack if you. I definitely agree with it there. I have the Braves as my number 5 stack, so I'm not particularly interested. Not that I'm interested in baseball. Everybody. But I would be more likely to be under the field on Atlanta Bat. Uh-oh.
What happened?
Volume, Zach.
Da-da-da.
You hear me perfectly, right?
I do hear you. But chat can't hear you? Do you sound like a robot again?
I guess. I think it's going in and out. I mean, I don't kind of annoy.
I hate technology so much. It makes no sense to me.
Volume is low. Going in and out. I do enjoy when everyone in chat tells me.
Yeah, so it's not one person.
Yeah, but the problem is when you don't hear it, it's really hard to bug test that.
Yeah, just rely on random people on YouTube. Just be like, hey, YouTube guy, we're gonna do some troubleshooting.
Let's give that a test. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I don't know if what I'm doing is helping, but I guess we'll find out.
All right. Well, some people are mentioning it in our premium Slack now. All right. Shan0 just said that it sounds better now that it's fixed.
Okay. Well,
did it just fix itself? Did you even change anything?
No, I don't have anything to change. I look at my meters. Everything is working as intended. So I don't know what could be the issue, but yay, we're back. Welcome back, us. Fixed. Play Austin Riley. I don't know. I don't know where we were.
So to your point, I think it makes sense to be underweight on the chalky Braves bats and then overweight to the less owned Braves bats. I mean, because that's how I'm approaching stacks. Is I really like some of those guys at the bottom of the order that aren't picking up ownership.
I think it's a much easier way to get to Atlanta if you start working those guys in. There shouldn't be that big of a disparity. Not that I mean, they are expensive. I guess that's really the problem. So it might not be naturally coming up in your optimizer, aka Fantasy Cruncher. And then we go to the Marlins side of this one. And it's interesting because we have Miami with the lowest odds on the slate of being the top stack. They do, however, have a 30% chance of being the top value play. They're not really picking up much ownership. Honestly, outside of Dickerson and Birdie, everybody else is 10% or lower. Do you kind of like the Marlins against that Ian Anderson ownership?
So here's the issue I have with them. One, I wish they were still a little bit lower owned. The other thing too is, like, what are we doing with the salary savings? So on DraftKings, if you are only going with the Marlins back to just saving a ton of salary, then yeah, there's Kershaw to pay up for, but then what else are you doing with the salary savings, right? Because there's Ian Anderson's the next most expensive pitcher. Then you've got Zach Davies. I don't really have all that much interest in him if he's who ends up starting. There's Tanaka and Morton, Luzardo or Keedy. Obviously, we talked about Pablo Lopez, but all those guys are cheap. So you're just going to end up with probably a lot of leftover salary, which isn't necessarily terrible for GPP, but I don't necessarily think it's optimal either. So I think the Marlins are okay. I wouldn't say you have to totally fade them, but at the same time, I don't have all that much interest in them, because the other thing too is, while they do create a little bit of leverage, the field is still playing them a little bit. They're still around 10% projected ownership as a stack. There are some individual bats that I think make sense as one-offs. Like you said, Birdie, although he's also a little bit popular. But for a guy as cheap as he is on DraftKings, he has stolen base upside. He's not a terrible hitter, 114 WRC plus in the regular season. So I don't mind Birdie as a one-off. It's hard for me to justify making 5-man Marlin stacks. Maybe I'd be a little bit more inclined on DraftKings to make a 3-man stack of them to go along with a 5-man stack.
I'm a little surprised they're not picking up more ownership. Like, if Matt Joyce is in the lineup at 2,200, I don't think that he can be 1% owned. I think that number will go up.
So here's the issue with some of those guys, though, and I never know what to do with projections for him. He's going to get pinch hit for.
Yeah.
He's only getting maybe 2 plate appearances in the game. And so those guys who are like Chad Pinder the other day was coming out as a great value play for me for the A's. But at the same time, I'm going, how much exposure do I want on a guy who I know is getting pinch hit for at some point in the middle of the game? And that's the issue I also have with some guys like Matt Joyce. I've never quite figured out what the right answer is for those players. I don't know. Do you have anything more sophisticated than my take on that, where it's like what do you do with guys who you think are very likely to get pinch hit for?
2 options. One is just simply adjust their plate appearances and take them out and see where they show up from there. I care about it a lot less when someone is like Matt Joyce and he's 2,200 compared to if I think somebody has some pinch hit risk at like 4K. If Matt Joyce gets you 2 plate appearances plus at 2,200, I'm just going to hope that goes well enough for me at that point in time, because 1, we don't really know how all of that'll shake out. 2, it's probably an issue that will peek its head out in all 4 games. There's not, I don't want to say there's no rhyme or reason for it, because obviously some teams are more likely to do it, and some, depending on if you're facing a righty or a lefty, you could see yourself having to do it more often. When you're cheap enough, I don't really care. If you start getting expensive, like what would be a good example? Like Adam Duvall, for instance. Like, pretty easy to pinch hit for him later on in the game. He's 4,200. If you lose those additional plate appearances, it's a lot harder to pay off 4,200 than it is 2,200. But ultimately, unless you've got a guy with really extreme platoon splits, you do have to do a little bit of manual manipulation. It's really hard to automate something like that.
Yeah, that's I generally tend to include those guys more in stacks and try to not have them in one-offs, just because, like, hey, if the whole team is sitting, he's going to be involved, but if the starting pitcher goes really well, then obviously less likely to have those plate appearances, and then he's probably going to get pinch hit for at some point also. So that's generally how I approach it. I've never really nailed down what I think the ideal approach is to those guys.
Yeah, neither have I, to be perfectly honest. I definitely want more than 1% of Matt Joyce if he's 1% owned, though.
That is fair.
Is there anything else we need to... Who's your favorite Braves bat? Who's your favorite Marlins bat?
My favorite Braves bat is... I mean, it kind of has to be Travis d'Arnaud, just because of the scarcity at the catcher position, but he's also going to be really popular. If I was going with a less popular bat, it'd probably be Austin Riley. I think he's a guy who's not very likely to get pinch hit for. There's a lot of power upside there. And generally one of those guys who's home run or bust, has the potential to break a GPP. From the Marlins side of the game, I think Matt Joyce does make some sense. I wouldn't go with either of the bottom of the order guys. Birdie on DraftKings is the best value, 2,400, multiple position eligibility, could play second base, could play outfield, and the stolen base upside. He was among the league leaders in stolen bases this year.
Breaking news. Zach Davies will start for the Padres, as I was expecting, as Bill Siebert in chat was not expecting for the entire time that we were in here. He was very much telling us that it was Paddock. So, swing and a miss. Proper terminology on a baseball show.
Swing and a miss. Something Zach Davies will not be doing tonight.
Probably not. Do you have anything else you want to touch on for Braves Marlins?
No, I think we covered that about as extensively as we could.
I would agree. To the Astros we go. Astros and A's. 4.5 run implied total on both sides. This is a coin flip game. Urquidy versus Luzardo. Urquidy 6% owned on DraftKings, 2% on FanDuel. Luzardo 2% on FanDuel, 4% on DraftKings. Not a lot of ownership coming in here. Do you want to go to either one of the pitchers? In particular, in my opinion, what do you think of Urquidy?
So I'm much more inclined to play Luzardo than I am Urquidy, and this is despite having a ton of bias towards the Astros. Unlike the rest of the public, everybody hates the Astros. I bet on the Astros coming into the playoffs, and I've been high on them each of the last couple of slates, and I'm somebody who's been actively rooting for the Astros. But with that said, Jesus Luzardo, one of the more talented young pitchers in baseball, also pretty favorable fantasy outlook because he's a guy who strikes out a hitter per inning. Last year in his limited time at the big leagues, struck out 12 hitters per innings, and you look at his minor league stats, always just crazy strikeout numbers. So he's a really high upside prospect, and just an ownership play. Like look at what his ownership is today compared to the rest of the field. This is the one pitcher we could look at as just very good leverage. He's projected for 3% ownership on DraftKings, almost none on FanDuel with a strikeout upside. It's not impossible for him to do well. I definitely expect him to do better relative to. I think his chance of upside is much higher than what his ownership suggests, and our top pitcher tool also bears that out. He is on DraftKings an 18% chance to be a top 2 pitcher on the slate, 4% projected ownership. So with all that considered, I think Luzardo is a good option. As for Urquidy, he just does not have a very fantasy-friendly game, and his peripheral stats are terrible compared to what his actual ERA was. He had a really low 2.73 ERA, but you look at the peripheral numbers, 4.71 FIP, a 5.36 xFIP. Strikeouts, only struck out 5.16 hitters per 9 innings. I don't think Urquidy's particularly good, and this is a spot where I'd be higher on the athletic side of the game than Urquidy as a pitcher.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, so we're on opposite sides here because I like. It's kind of scary. Urquidy's stuff just appears to not exist like it did last year, and that's not all that ideal for a fantasy perspective. I'm just surprised to see such minimal ownership for both of these guys. I understand the offenses on both sides are good, borderline elite, depending on which team you're looking at. That said, I assume one of them gets out of here with a decent line, and given the ownership on both of these guys, I think it's really, really easy to want to go to one of them. It's not fun. I prefer Urquidy just because he doesn't face the Astros, but I like the idea of going to either one of these guys as a way to get a different construction from a pitching perspective. I think they're just simply too low owned. And in the top pitcher tool, Luzardo, 18, as you mentioned, 18% owned, or 18% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 4% ownership. Urquidy, 11% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 6% ownership. I think they're just going a little underrepresented. I'm willing to take that chance as of right now. I'm not saying to lock them in or anything like that, but
no,
if Urquidy's 6, I'm happy to go to 12 to 18.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and if we look at, like we were mentioning, the top pitcher tool, where, I mean, I think the 18% chance of him being a top 2 pitcher is very fair. There's only 8 pitchers to choose from tonight. And with that considered, I mean, 4% ownership is so low. Think about what the narrative was around the Astros just a few days ago. I didn't think it was correct, except it's so crazy to think that people were going from thinking about the Astros, a team that couldn't hit at all, to a team where, hey, we've seen them hit for a couple of games and we're not going to roster pitchers against them at all. So it's just such a crazy turn, because I think the first slate they were on, Kenta Maeda was like the second chalkiest pitcher. Yeah. And now we're at a spot where just nobody wants to roster pitcher against him at all. So I think that Luzardo way underowned.
How deep do you think he can go in this game?
Let me bring up some of his recent game logs, because I think he could go relatively deep if everything goes well. I mean, they've been willing to pitch him to 100 pitches so far this year. The one concern here, which is going to be the concern for any playoff team at this point, is if he gets off to a bad start, especially because the A's are in an 0-2 hole, he's going to come out very quickly.
Yeah.
So the downside is there, except does it really matter at that point? Because if he is a bad first or second inning, then any lineup with him probably wasn't going to sit well anyway. If he pitches well in the first couple innings, then he's going to be able to work deeper into the game. But yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of a concern that he might be a little limited. His last 2 outings of the year, 54 and 59 pitches.
I'm with you in that it doesn't really matter. If he's pitching well, he's going to pitch until he's not, basically. I mean, I don't expect a complete game or anything like that, but if it's going bad, it doesn't matter whether he keeps pitching or not. Like, you're not going to get saved by that. He's just you're already dead. So
yeah, I mean, think of it this way also, because it's GPP that the top 18% of the field is getting paid out. If you don't get a good first couple innings from Luzardo, it doesn't matter if you finish top 50th percentile or you finish in the bottom 10th percentile. It's the same outcome for GPP. And Luzardo is certainly not somebody I'd consider in cash games if you're still playing him at this point in the season. But if you're playing multiple lineups, throwing Luzardo into 10-12%, I think is a good way to get a different build on a lineup.
350 people in here right now, 65 likes. So I think it's a no-brainer that you guys hit that thumbs up and take us over 100. Let's get to triple digits. It would help us out a ton. Let's talk offense now, because both of these teams have plenty of home run power to be found. If we look at the top stacks tool to start, Oakland is at the top, 16% chance of being the top stack, slightly outpacing their ownership share, but they are a fantastic value as well. Houston is 4th, but there's not much of a gap between Oakland and Houston. Houston projecting as slightly over-owned, but again, the margins here are pretty small. Nobody's taking any real extremes. Which side of the game do you prefer?
Yeah, I slightly prefer the A's side, even though I kind of hope that the Astros win just for my own betting purposes. But the reason is just because I think that Luzardo is a much better pitcher than Urquidy. And if we just look at, like I said, the way that Urquidy's pitched so far this year, it's hard for me to ever really back a pitcher who just doesn't generate swing and misses and doesn't generate strikeouts. And also just that his peripheral numbers are so much worse than his actual 2.73 ERA. Just to rehash some of the numbers from before, he only struck out 5.16 hitters per 9 innings this year, 4.71 FIP, a 5.36 xFIP. So the ERA was low, except it's mostly luck-based. So let's try to figure out why that was. For starters, an 86.6% strand rate. That's a ridiculously high number that's not sustainable. The BABIP, 209 BABIP. That's also a ridiculously low number that's not sustainable. And he only made 5 starts in the regular season. So that's how we see some of those unsustainable kind of weird small sample size numbers pop up. I don't really think Urquidy is a good pitcher. And for that reason, I'm more apt to go to the Oakland side of the game because I actually think Luzardo is good.
I don't know what to make of it, but I will say this. I'm also more likely to go to the Oakland side of this game. Oakland coming in 2nd for me. But again, the margins are really tight between these teams. It's weird. I think I prefer Urquidy as the pitcher, but I prefer Oakland as the stack. The good thing about baseball is you can have both of those things. I mean, obviously not in one lineup. It's probably not going to get you very far, but I would like to be on both sides of this. And Urquidy's not a guy that I would want to have 60% of. But if I had 15... still opens me up to a bunch of Oakland. Semien, Pinder, Davis, Olsen, the 4 guys grading out the best to me. They are also the 4 highest owned guys on DraftKings. So I'm not exactly bringing anything to the table there. Chad Pinder being 2K is just silly with dual eligibility. It's just not helpful.
The only thing is he's almost certainly not starting today because Pinder starts again. Generally, Pinder starts against lefties. And Jake Lamb starts against righties. Yeah. But it kind of goes hand in hand because Jake Lamb's also ridiculously cheap. So we're probably going to get cheap Jake Lamb in the lineup. And he hit 3rd the other day against right-handed pitching. So that's what I expect. I expect Jake Lamb will hit 3rd again.
Who's your favorite Oakland Bat today?
Favorite Oakland Bat. Is it 2 points, Chasey, to say Chris Davis? Because Chris Davis hit 2 home runs all regular season, then he hit 3 home runs in the last 4 games. With it said, Chris Davis has always been a streak power hitter throughout his career. And the fact that we had a shortened season where he just kind of struggled, only hit 2 home runs, and then he hits 3 home runs in 4 games, I tend to think the power is there now. And it's not like he's picking up a ton of ownership. It's not like people are going like, hey, I need to roster Chris Davis because he hit home runs lately. He's still been a guy who's been pretty low owned in the last few slates. So it's probably going to be Chris Davis for me for the power upside. The other thing that's funny about Chris Davis, too, is he's always been kind of a joke within the baseball industry because he hit 243 almost every season. He had a stretch of like 4 years in a row where he hit 243 and then hit, was it 42, 48, 43 homers in those seasons also. So he's always been a really consistent guy. And then it was just kind of this year. And then he struggled a little bit last year where he got thrown off a little bit. But I still like the power upside from Chris Davis.
By the way, Oakland lineup official, Chad Pinder is hitting third.
There we go. So that does make him a little more desirable.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I prefer him when he with him starting than with him not starting.
Yeah. 2K, Chad Pinder. It's already getting the ownership, but I understand why it's happening. Relative to salary, I think he is the best option. But Chris Davis, a close second, and you get him at half of the ownership. So I'm with you. I like the Chris Davis side.
By the way, one more note on Chad Pinder before we go forward. Like I was saying the other day, is one of the concerns I always have with Pinder is that him being pinch hit for when a righty comes in the game. They're starting him against a righty, so it seems they don't have any issue with him hitting against a right-handed pitcher. So for that reason, I think there's a lot less risk of him being pinch hit in this game than normally is.
Ooh. Just got the alert from Amazon that my spreadable salami has been delivered. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Is it outside roasting in the sun?
Probably. I'm going to put that on, get a nice crusty bread, maybe a little, some sort of nutty cheese, make a nice grilled cheese with some spreadable salami. Oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. Let's slide over to the Astros side now. Again, we don't have to worry too much about ownership from the pitching perspective, so there's not a lot of leverage to be found there. Astros clearly picking up a ton of ownership. Springer, Altuve, Bregman, 27 to 34% owned. You're getting some love to Brantley and Correa. How do you want to approach the Astros right now? Because they're loaded. This is just a team full of all-stars.
Yeah, I wish the pricing was more accurate on them because you look at the salaries are ridiculous. I mean, Altuve 4,200 on DraftKings, Bregman 41, Correa 4,000. Even on FanDuel, they're also pretty cheap relative to what they normally are. You know, usually when we've seen the Astros historically, they're one of the most expensive offenses on every slate, and that's just not the case on either site today. So the pricing's off. It's too cheap. Like I said, I do think that Luzardo's a decent starting pitcher. But I also think the Astros are a fine team to stack. The ownership is also there for Houston. They're going to be one of the more popular offenses on the slate. We have them second behind the Dodgers right now, but the ownership's also pretty flat overall for offenses. I think the Astros are fine today, but not really my favorite team to look at.
Yeah, they do not grade out all that well for me, given the way that the rest of this slate looks. I would assume to be under the field on the Astros from a hitting perspective. Wouldn't have expected that because I don't think that any of them are all, or like, I don't think anybody has a really ridiculous price tag. Like Springer at 4,800 is more than okay with me in the leadoff spot. I just think it's easier to find offense elsewhere.
Fun fact about the Astros, George Springer and Carlos Correa, no pair of teammates has homered more in a postseason game than those two.
Really?
Yep. Carlos Correa and George Springer.
Ever? Wow.
Part of the reason it's skewed though is because they play more playoff games and playoff series now than they used to back in the day.
Yeah.
Or else I'm sure it would have been something, like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, except they play.
It used to just be two for the longest time. So that does make some sense. Still a little surprised. Wouldn't have been like if you told me that it was somebody for two older ass like Bagwell plus somebody or two of the Braves from when they were in like the 16-year run, but they didn't have a ton of like Andrew Jones. Chipper Jones would have been a combo that I would have expected.
So also think about the continuity. So not only have the Astros made a bunch of postseason runs, it's with the same guys that have played together for a really long time. A lot of other teams just had a lot of turnover.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of other teams that would have had two and get to the playoffs fairly regularly. Chipper and Andrew are the first two that come to my mind as a lapsed Braves fan. That's how I get there pretty quickly. You got to assume that they're pretty close to the top, all things considered. The T McBee's mentioning Yankees, so it would have to be like Jeter plus somebody, which is, it's not like Jeter was ever any sort of like major power threat.
So you'd go to like some of those other Yankee teams like A-Rod, but then also there was so much turnover on those teams. Like, how many years did A-Rod and Teixeira even play together, or Giambi and somebody?
Yeah.
There wasn't that much continuity on those teams.
No, not at all. I'm having trouble picturing anybody really. I can't picture anybody else. So not enough experience for the Cardinals. So like Pujols plus somebody. I don't know. That's an interesting stat. I would have never gotten that. I would have definitely guessed someone further back. So imagine what they're going to end up with if they stick around.
Yeah, it could be a lot. And then one other one when we talk about the Padres later, Will Myers and Fernando Tatis both hit 2 homers in the same game, which is only the second time that's happened in playoff history. The other time it was Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
Whew. I've heard of those guys.
Yeah, I've got all the fun facts loaded up today.
All right, we're at the midway point of this show. 394 people in here, 99 likes. So you guys didn't do what I asked before. We should have no problem getting that additional thumbs up. Free content today. If you want to check out some of the stuff we have at awesemo.com, our NFL Top Stacks tool is free today. So if you want to start your prep for Sunday, you can go check out NFL Top Stacks. You guys are here for a baseball show. You're in luck. MLB ownership, also free today. And then our PGA Top Golfers tool, Golf Locks tomorrow. It's the Shriners. You can check out Alex's Top Golfers tool. That is also free for today. It's not bad. Not bad at all. Get those goods.
Nothing better than free. Nothing better than free.
No, not at all. Free's the best. Yankees and Rays, 4.7 run implied total for the Yanks, 4.2 for the Rays, 55% chance to win for New York. Masahiro Tanaka picking up a bunch of ownership. 18% owned on FanDuel at 7,500. 38% owned on DraftKings at 6,800. And then it's the exact same story on the other side. Charlie Morton, 7,800 on FanDuel, 16% owned. 34% owned on DraftKings at 6,600. I get it. Both of these guys are underpriced relative to their skill set. They're picking up the ownership that they deserve. I prefer Morton to Tanaka. But either way, I don't know how you get away from these guys. And their prices, I don't care about the matchup. Those guys picking up the ownership that they have, and Ian Anderson being at 8,200 and significantly more owned, that seems really wrong to me.
So another point in this game as we talk about the offense, I also think that there's a lot of leverage to stacking against these guys because both these offenses have a lot of upside also.
Yeah.
I was actually ready to have Charlie Morton as my favorite pitcher on the slate. When I first looked at the pricing, I was like, oh, nobody's going on a roster. Pitchers are going up against the Yankees right now. Charlie Morton, he's way too cheap. And then the ownership came out and I was like, oh, crap. Well, everybody realized that also. Everybody realized that Charlie Morton's really good and isn't really getting ownership. It was a little bit of a down year for Morton, but still the peripheral stats are decent. Struck out nearly 10 hitters per 9 innings. I agree with you. I'm more apt to roster Morton than Tanaka. Tanaka doesn't have quite the same upside. And also peak Tanaka isn't quite as good of a pitcher as Morton. Yeah. And then also Tanaka 8.25 strikeouts per 9 innings this year, 7.37 strikeouts per 9 innings last year. I think the Rays do make for a very good leverage stack, and I like their upside a lot.
I have the Rays ranked as my favorite team of the day.
Nice. There we go. I love the confirmation bias.
We should do more baseball shows together.
The other thing with Tanaka too is when he is not pitching well, he gives up home runs. That is what happens when Tanaka's off. Is he's given up long balls, a 16.4% home run to fly ball rate this year. For his career, he has a 16.1% home run to fly ball rate and north of 15% almost every year of his career. So when Tanaka's getting hit hard, he's giving up home runs. So that's also what's really nice about the Rays in this spot. They're also not all that expensive, but just everything to me lines up here. Is there's a little bit of upside here. The pitcher's getting ownership. Pricing's right, and the route to Tanaka struggling is giving up home runs.
And that plays in perfectly for the Rays. Yankee Stadium. Oh, it's not in Yankee Stadium, so never mind.
No, it's at whatever they call it. It used to be Petco. It's not Petco anymore. Now it's different sponsorship field in San Diego.
Yeah, I have the visual of park factors like next to the Yankees because they're in the home slot on my display. Doesn't have anything to do with the calculations, but I was about to say that Yankee Stadium plays up left-handed power tremendously. So Meadows, Lau, Choi, and Kiermaier all look pretty tasty as lefty power. The park doesn't matter. They still look great as lefty power, but they are not hitting in.
Or is it still Petco Park?
I can't remember anything. Like, I know the Giants aren't Oracle anymore, or they are Oracle now. It's not. Or are they AT&T Park now? I can't keep track of the people that paid to own a stadium for 3 years. I know the Astros don't play at Enron anymore.
Yeah, they weren't paying out anybody. But it is nice that it is nice the Yankee Stadium is Yankee Stadium, right? It's an easy one to remember. Yeah. They're not taking money from anybody. That's the one place the Yankees are not willing to bring in revenue. Is like, we're going to keep our name Yankee Stadium. But yeah, I think the Padres might actually still be Petco.
If the Yankees were to sell their naming rights for their stadium, what would be the most Yankees sponsor to take that naming rights? Because I don't think that they would do it for a non-name.
It would be funny if it was just GoDaddy Park, though.
That's what I mean, though. Like, I don't think that they would do it just to cash the biggest check. Like, there would be some sort of like marketing impact too. T McBee says Bank of America, but that's an actual stadium, isn't it?
Yeah, that's already one.
Yeah.
Is it? I know Citizens Bank Park is one.
Yes, that would be the Phils.
Wells Fargo already has one.
Yeah.
It would definitely be a bank or some sort of investment firm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't... What's like...
Globo Gym.
What's the most... What sort of business, high-end business is most synonymous with New York City? Because it would be like Wall Street, but you can't... Can like the NASDAQ sponsor the stadium?
What was the name of the joint that Bob Kraft went to and got arrested at?
I don't know, but I could do some research if you'd like. I'll go on assignment. T McBee says Goldman Sachs. We're getting warmer.
Sachs, there's a baseball tie in there also.
Yeah. Steve Sachs can come back and do something. Berkshire Hathaway Park. Now we're talking. Although that would need to be in like Omaha or whatever. Doesn't Warren Buffett live in like a tiny ass house in the middle of Nebraska?
No.
I think I'm almost positive that he and his wife live in some like normal house that they've lived in for 60 years.
Damn, drives like a Nissan or something.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure he lives in like nowhere, Nebraska, in a very modest home. It might not be Nebraska, but and like he might own other property, but I think his like day-to-day is not there. Anyway, people don't care about the faux naming rights to the Yankee Stadium.
We got time to kill though.
Not really. 145.
I guess we have killed a lot.
Yeah, we've killed most of it. So kudos to us. Let's go through the Rays bats to start, since we both seem to be there. Meadows, Lau, Arozarena, which I think I just said for the first time ever, and it seemed like it came out pretty good. Choi, that one I can do for sure.
Nailed it.
All in double digits in ownership. I think Austin Meadows might be the best play of the slate. 4,300 in the leadoff spot.
I love Arozarena. Super quick bat, a lot of power upside, especially in the playoffs. He's been hitting well, and he's been getting better as the season has gone along. I think that he makes a lot of sense. Brandon Lau, who also was the MVP favorite in the American League at around the midway point, if I remember correctly, at least in terms of sports betting odds. So yeah, I think that this is a great team to stack, like we said before, and the pricing is not really all that ridiculous. Brandon Lau was somebody who was like around 5,000 his price tag for most of the season. So I don't mind him, even though he's the most expensive hitter on. Oh, he is 5,100 on DraftKings. 3,800 on FanDuel is pretty cheap for him. But yeah, I don't mind paying up for him either. I like the Rays.
Per Voodoo Chicken, Bob Kraft was caught at Orchids of Asia.
There we go. Orchids of Asia Park.
I'd play there. I love Austin Meadows. I love Lau. I love Choi. If I need to get a little bit weirder, $2,900 Kiermaier at the bottom looks pretty good. Who knows how many at-bats he actually gets.
One other, Mike Zunino, 3,100, power upside at catcher. He is going to put up 0 fantasy points basically 6 days a week, and then the one day he's going to hit like 2 home runs. So Mike Zunino, ultimate boom-bust option at the catcher position.
So I think Zunino is actually, relative to ownership, the best catcher play on the slate. We've got Will Smith, Travis Darneau soaking up 64% of all of the ownership. I don't think that Zunino is all that different for what you're trying to get there. Just trying to buy a home run, basically, at 3,100. He's at 4% ownership. Those guys are just not that likely to outpace him for what you want. So I think relative to salary in a GPP scenario, whether that's in a stack with a raise or as a one-off catcher, I think Zunino might be the best option on the slate.
Yeah, I think behind Darneau, he's the most likely catcher to homer on the slate, and the ownership is significantly lower on Zunino.
Let's talk a little bit of these Yankees bats.
Think people are going to roster Giancarlo Stanton today?
Yeah, is he going to put another ball into orbit? Because he seems to be putting lots of balls into orbit.
So as a stack, I don't really love the Yankees today because it isn't really an ideal matchup against Morton. And the prices are really expensive also. I mean, LeMahieu's expensive, Judge is expensive, Voit is expensive. Unfortunately, the one high-end bat who isn't expensive is Giancarlo Stanton, who is, what was he, 4,400 on DraftKings. That's ridiculous.
He's 9% owned. That can't be right.
Yeah, that's not true.
No.
Everybody's going to want to roster Giancarlo Stanton. Everything he touches goes 550 feet right now.
Yeah.
But as a one-off bat, I think that he's definitely a fantastic option. If that 9% ownership is true, then yeah, he's a ridiculously good play.
The reaction of the pitchers when some of these balls are leaving the yard. It's just like they don't even have to look. They know immediately. It must sound like a cannon going off with nobody in the park.
There was, I mean, that home run that like Glasnow gave up yesterday, you see, he immediately looks down, the catcher looks down, and the umpire just looks straight up in the air like that. So yeah, the reactions are ridiculous. Stanton really should be the most expensive hitter on the Yankees lineup. Yeah. Really, the only issue with Stanton for fantasy over the course of the year is he gets hurt a lot. He's healthy right now. Whenever he's healthy, he hits bombs. That's what he does. He's by far the most likely hitter to hit a home run on this slate.
Yeah, you can't price somebody down because you think they might not play. Like if he's in, he should be 5K. There's no.
Which, by the way, is part of the FanDuel and DraftKings pricing algorithm. Players miss games and they get priced down for it all the time.
Right. Probably doesn't need to exist in the playoffs. Like there's no scenario where Luke Voit should be more expensive than Giancarlo Stanton. And I am an unavoidable believer, but he's just no. I want all of the if you knew that Stanton was 9%, I might lock button him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far because it's baseball, but yeah, the pricing is definitely off.
There will never be it'd be hard to have a better play without someone having a legitimately broken price where like somebody gets accidentally priced at the minimum. A 9% Stanton in the heart of the order. It's not like he's going to get pinch hit.
Yeah, just if you get the only one is we've seen players like FanDuel breaks the pricing where it's like, hey, Kike Hernandez is $8 today, or they purposefully break the pricing on Chris Davis. We're like, hey, if you want to roster Chris Davis for free, you can do it because he's going 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts today.
Yeah, get yourself some Stanton. He's certainly the best one-off option on the slate given that ownership. I'm relatively neutral on the Yankees stack. They rank 4th for me. They rank 5th for Alex. They are slightly underowned. I just don't have anything that's like ultimately interesting. Stanton looks incredible. I have no problem getting to Judge or Hicks. Given their prices, Hicks is cheap. Stanton is cheap for him. Judge is expensive, but properly priced. You can get there. You kind of have to pay up to be a little bit more contrarian here because there are a couple 5K bats for the Yanks, so it does get a little tough. Are there any like off the beaten path Yankees you like?
I don't really know if those exist. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of they're kind of the same across the board. I think a lot of these guys, the ones at the top, are so expensive. I mean, LeMahieu's fine, Judge is fine, Voigt's pretty overpriced. I'd rather go to Freddie Freeman there. It's crazy. You could get Freddie Freeman for a cheaper price than Luke Voigt. I guess there's some power upside, Clint Frazier. If I had to go with one of the non-main bats as my favorite per dollar play, it's Gleyber Torres at 3,900 on DraftKings.
Ooh, I like it. Only 6% owned, 3,900. That is not too bad, especially for a shortstop option. Let me see where he ranks in terms of my shortstops on DraftKings. So Tatis and Semien at the top, and then I would just happily get to Torres given that ownership. So I like that call. Anything else you want to touch on for Yanks Rays?
No, we can move on to the Clayton Kershaw game, the one that this is the spot that's most likely to get me in trouble on Twitter with people being angry.
Clayton Kershaw and the Dodgers 5-run implied total, Padres 3.6. This is what I had as we entered the show. I assume it's pretty close. 64% chance to win for the Dodgers. Again, Kershaw, 22% owned on FanDuel where he's 10-3. 47% owned on DraftKings where he's 9,600. As we go to the Padres side, it will be Zach Davies going for San Diego. He's not going to get owned at all today. He's 9,100 on DraftKings. That is $500 cheaper than Clayton Kershaw. Don't get against the Dodgers, no less. It's not like he gets to face a different team. I don't think that there's anything that we have to talk about with regards to Zach Davies. Do you have any sort of Zach Davies take?
No, other than that, I was thinking earlier in the day that, like, hey, if we get Chris Paddock announced as a starter, which is obviously irrelevant now, but I was thinking if we get Chris Paddock announced as a starter after the first game starts, that would have been a ridiculous spot to roster him because he would have had almost no ownership in that situation. But yeah, no interest in Zach Davies at 9,100.
So you probably haven't seen this news yet since we are live. This is not baseball related, but your t-shirt is very relevant. The Titans broke protocol and gathered for workouts last week.
Oh, so the NFL's just gonna make them forfeit games now.
Yeah, for sure.
I assume anyway.
Yep. You would think. Anyway, let's talk Kershaw. 47% owned on DK. I think he is quite clearly the top pitching option for today. And given Ian Anderson's ownership, if that maintains, I think Clayton Kershaw is an even better play than that. How do you feel about Kershaw?
I love him. So here's the other thing with Kershaw, particularly on FanDuel. I mean, one pitcher site and the price differences is all that different between the two of them. And for Kershaw, it'd be 22% owned versus 35% owned for Ian Anderson. The matchup is a little bit of a concern. And I know that people also just kind of point towards Clayton Kershaw and say, hey, I don't want to play this guy in the playoffs. He's not a good playoff pitcher. For sure, he's been a little bit worse in the playoffs than the regular season, although his SIERA is 3.1 for his career in the regular season and 3 flat in the postseason for his career. So what's gone wrong with Clayton Kershaw in the playoffs? And here's what it is. The Dodgers have had a lot of years with not great bullpens, and nobody's had worse luck with strand rate when the bullpen comes into the game than Clayton Kershaw. He's given up so many runs in the 7th inning over the course of his playoff career where he's come out of the game with a runner on first, runner on second, something like that. Bullpen comes in. They've been giving up that run almost 100% of the time throughout his career. That's really inflated his ERA. That's one of the reasons that the ERA is way higher for him in the postseason than it is for his regular season numbers. I mean, the other thing, too, is just he has such ridiculously good numbers in the regular season, and the matchups are a lot difficult in the postseason. So you just always expect the postseason ERA to be a little bit higher than the regular season. But, I mean, still, with that said, it's not like Clayton Kershaw sucks in the playoffs like a lot of people think. He's still a very good playoff pitcher and still arguably the best pitcher of our generation. Yeah. I'm fine with rostering him in the playoffs. I am a little bit concerned, though, just because I think the Padres have a ridiculous offense. So I wouldn't say that Kershaw's a lock button or anything like that, but I do think he's the overall best pitching option on the slate.
Yeah, well, we are on the same page here. There's just no reason to not spend up for him. And if Zach Davies is the closest guy in salary, it's not like that's a natural pivot. After that, you're going to $8,200 Ian Anderson, who I think is massively already over-owned. So the easiest funnel for you, if you have Clayton Kershaw, is Tanaka, I'm going to say Urquidy, or Morton. These guys are all priced in the high sixes. It doesn't, like, you can afford Kershaw, any one of those guys, and it will not affect your ability to put together stacks at all. There's just not that sort of salary problem. So I see no reason to not want to go to Kershaw. We obviously don't have much else to say with regards to pitching here. So let's talk a little bit about the bats. As I look at our top stack tool for today, I don't know if we've gotten a refresh, so I will refresh it. Dodgers are second. They are projecting as relatively neutral from an ownership perspective. San Diego is second from the bottom, about properly owned. The only guy getting any ownership for San Diego is Tatis. He's at 29%. Everybody else in single digits. Do you like the idea of going to the Padres against the Kershaw ownership, though?
Ish. Like, there's individual hitters I like. I like Fernando Tatis because I think Fernando Tatis could play well against anybody. Same goes for Manny Machado. But then some of these other bats, I also think we could consider Tommy Pham. I don't really want to go to a lot of these other Padres bats just because I do think that Kershaw is really good. They also have a really good bullpen behind them this year. The Dodgers have had not so great bullpens, like I mentioned, at times in the past, but over the last couple of years, they've had one of the better bullpens in baseball. So I think that's another issue for the Padres also. Let me think. Anybody else? No, Austin Nola's fairly expensive. Trent Grisham's expensive, hitting towards the bottom of the order. Then there's other guys like Jerks and Profar, I think is a risk to get pinch hit for. Talked about that a little bit earlier. So, yeah, I mean, the Padres are not a team that I'm really looking to target.
Yeah, I would rather go to some individual bats as well. I do think there is some merit to having full Padres stacks, just given the amount of power that some of these guys have. And Kershaw's, if you want to buy into the narrative that he hasn't been as good in the playoffs, there's an easy way to get there. But it's not going to look good. So I don't want to go to too much. Tatis and Machado at the top, Tommy Pham in the 5-hole are the three guys that stand out most to me. The more likely scenario for me is going to the Dodgers, although I have them as my number 3 stack. Betts looks good, but he's expensive, $5,700. I like Bellinger. Again, he's expensive, and I don't like that he's hitting down in the order. I would much rather see Cody Bellinger a bit higher. Makes it a little easier to pay off that salary. These guys are getting a ton of ownership. Betts at 27, Will Smith at 37, Cody Bellinger at 21. I think an easy way to roster the Dodgers is to simply not use Will Smith in the stack. There's a Zanino character that I think would slot into that catcher spot perfectly. And since he's cheaper, it allows you to get to some of these more expensive Dodgers bats. How do you want to handle stacking up the Dodgers?
Yeah, so, I mean, here's one of the things. I don't think Zach Davies is particularly good. He's certainly not as good as his what his ERA says, because he had a 2.73 ERA this year. But with that said, he's always a guy who's slightly outperformed his peripheral stats. He doesn't give up a whole lot of hard contact. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs. So for that was a very odd accent I put on that. Homers. Like, I don't know what that was. I was just saying things, looking at numbers. But so Davies is a pitcher who I generally don't really stack against in DFS, but I don't roster either. This is a little bit of a different situation because, I mean, limited options and just the small slate and whatnot. I still don't have any interest in rostering Davies. If there's one pitcher to totally take out of the player pool today, it's Zach Davies. The Dodgers, just because they do have such a good offense, I'm more willing to target them against Davies than most teams. But to what you said before, also fairly neutral play for me. I don't think they're that much more likely to be the highest scoring team on the slate than what their ownership suggests.
Who's your favorite Dodgers bat?
Favorite Dodgers bat? I don't know if there's one I really like all that much. Maybe Justin Turner, relatively favorable price tag at $4,500. Hits in a good spot in the order. He is also $3,100 on FanDuel, so I think he's a little underpriced on both sites. That's really the only player I think we could say that about in the Dodgers lineup.
Yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, everybody is already getting the ownership that they probably deserve. I do think Will Smith is the most over-owned bat in the Dodgers, but that's neither here nor there. Anything else you want to touch on from Dodgers-Padres? We got a couple minutes before we go to lock, so that was a quick hour.
I thought we were going to bail like 20 minutes ago, but here we are. We got to all kinds of great content, like what the Yankees should name their stadium.
Yeah.
And just like that, the time was filled.
I could fill time like the best of them.
Other bats here. There's really nobody who stands out to me as an exceptional play from the Dodgers. Maybe if you want to pivot and put Austin Barnes into a stack instead of Will Smith, that makes a little bit of sense. But still, I think a lot of these bats are kind of over-owned and overpriced.
We're going to close with this comment from Derek Phillips in chat. My favorite part of MLB DFS is researching for hours and finishing dead last.
There you go. That's what it's all about.
That's good. That's good. All right, let's sum it up. Who's your favorite stack for the day? Who's your favorite pitching combination for the day?
Favorite stack of the day is the Tampa Bay Rays. My favorite pitching combination on DraftKings, Clayton Kershaw and Jesus Luzardo.
Okay. I will also go to the Rays as my top stack. I will also choose Clayton Kershaw, but I would like Charlie Morton as my second starter with Kershaw. It looks good. Urquidy if you want to get really weird, but makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, I'm just not sure there's enough upside there with the limited strikeouts.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what's the best case scenario for Urquidy? Because even when he's going really well, the strikeouts aren't quite there. So he goes 6 innings, gets 3 or 4 strikeouts. I'm just not sure that's enough to outpace the other pitchers on the slate.
Yeah, it does make me a little nervous. That is mostly just based on him being 6% owned. If he picked up any sort of ownership, it would be a lot easier to get away. And that'll do it, guys. MLB Live Before Lock in the books. You guys still have a couple minutes to get your lineups in before lock, but this is baseball. This is not like we need to. There's not going to be news in the next 5 minutes that we need to worry about. So good luck today. Let's see what we have else on the docket for the rest of today. I have it pulled up here. So Jason Floyd, Pete Rogers doing some MMA strategy tonight at 7:30, and then PGA Live Before Lock, Jason Roslin and Ben Raza talking Shriners tonight at 8:30. Those are the next 2 shows. Good luck, everybody. Any final thoughts, Greg?
Giancarlo Stanton hits at least 1 home run that travels 500 feet today.
There you go. I will be watching, that's for sure, because his at-bats are a treat. Good luck today. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning on the MLB Strategy Show with Adam. I don't know when Greg's back, but I'm sure he's probably back tomorrow doing something. So good luck, everybody.
I have no clue. The schedule's so in flux. I have no clue what I'm doing.
Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you later.